Good morning everyone. Myself Dr. Ravi Keshri. In the previous section, I will discuss about the neurons, the types of the neurons, the neuroglia cells, and today I will discuss very important concept, the neuromuscular spindle or muscular spindle. What is neuromuscular spindle? It is also called the muscular spindle, and it is a sensory organ. It is a sensory organ which is spindle in shape and is present within the skeletal muscle. It is present within the skeletal muscles and its shape is spindle shaped. Shape is spindle shaped and it is also called the neuromuscular spindle or muscular spindle. Now there are three types of the muscles: the skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscles, and the smooth muscles. This neuromuscular spindle, it is present within the skeletal muscles, and this organ is enclosed in a spindle shaped connective tissue capsule. It is surrounded by the capsule, and this capsule is made up of the connective tissue, and there are about 3 to 10 specialized muscles fiber, that is the intrafusal muscle fiber. The spindle is oriented parallel to the regular skeletal muscle fiber which surrounds the spindle. The two types of fiber, one is the extrafusal fibers and second is the intrafusal fibers. And these extrafusal and intrafusal fibers, they are innervated by the different types of the neurons. One is the alpha motor neuron and second is the gamma motor neurons. These intrafusal fibers and the extrafusal fibers. Extrafusal fibers are innervated by alpha motor neurons, and the intrafusal fibers, they are innervated by the motor neurons, that is the gamma motor neurons, as well as the sensory fibers. I have shown in the figure. This is the structure of the neuromuscular spindle, and this is the capsule. This is the capsule, and this is the extrafusal fiber. This is the extrafusal fiber. This is the capsule, and these two are the intrafusal fiber. One is the nuclear bag fiber, and second is the nuclear chain fibers. And the extrafusal fibers, they are innervated by the alpha motor neurons, and the intrafusal fibers, they are innervated by the gamma motor neurons. Here are in the muscular spindle. There are two types of the neurons. One is the alpha motor neuron and second is the gamma motor neuron, and this is the capsule. The intrafusal fiber are surrounded by the capsule which is made up of the connective tissue. Now the two types of fiber I have discussed, the extrafusal fibers and second is the intrafusal fiber. One is the extrafusal fiber and second is the intrafusal fiber. Now what is stretch reflex? Second concept, the stretch reflex. What is stretch reflex? It is characterized by the stretching of the muscle. Stretching of the muscle which is followed by the muscle contraction. Stretching of the muscle followed by the muscle contraction. For example, during the extension of the forearm, the biceps muscles stretches, and during the flexion the biceps muscles contract. This is the concept of the stretch reflex, that is the extension of the forearm followed by the flexion of the forearm, that is the stretch reflex. And the muscle contraction in turn, it relieves the stretching, and the muscle spindle maintains the change in length through the stretch reflex. It maintains the change in length through the stretch reflex. Now there is the stretching. What is the concept? First, there is the stretching of the extrafusal fiber, and it also stretches the intrafusal fibers and results in nerve impulses being conducted to the spinal cord, and thereafter the impulses are passed on to the sensory neuron which synapses with the alpha motor neuron, which are present in the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord, and the alpha motor neuron then send impulses for the contraction of the stretched extrafusal muscle fiber. This is the concept. First there is the stretching in the extrafusal fibers, and then there is the stretching in the intrafusal fiber. Then the sensory neurons are activated, and these sensory neurons, from the sensory neuron, the nerve impulses passes towards the spinal cord in the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord, and in the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord, here is the synapse occur with the alpha motor neuron, and then the nerve impulses goes towards the extrafusal fibers, and there will be the contraction in the muscle fiber, in the contraction in the extrafusal fibers. First there is the stretching and then followed by the contraction of the intrafusal fibers. Sometimes these alpha motor, these sensory neurons, not synapses with the alpha motor neuron, and it passes to the passage from the spinal cord towards the sensory cortex of the brain, and from the sensory cortex of the brain, nerve impulses passes towards the motor cortex of the brain, and from through the corticospinal tract. Through the corticospinal tract, these nerve impulses goes towards the spinal cord, and from the in the spinal cord, here is the gamma in the anterior horn cells, the gamma motor neurons are present, and here the fibers, synapses is the gamma motor neuron, and then gamma motor neuron, it from the gamma motor neurons the nerve impulses travels towards the intrafusal fibers and mid portion, and only the mid portion, this stretches the mid portion of the intrafusal fibers and starts the impulses, the volume of impulses in the sensory axon, and thus the gamma motor neurons keeps the spindle sensitive all the time. The gamma motor neuron keeps the sensitive all the time. This is the concept of the alpha motor neurons and the gamma motor neurons. I will discuss that the stretch reflex also mediated through the brain. How it mediated through the brain? The stretch reflex, it mediated through the axon of the motor cortex in the corticospinal tract. And during large muscle contraction, the spindle becomes loose and it is unable to send the signals. In this situation, when there is the large muscle contraction, the spindle becomes loose and is unable to send signals. In this case, the gamma motor neurons are stimulated under the influence of the higher center of the brain, and this stretches the mid portion. This stretches the mid portion of the intrafusal fibers and starts the volume of impulses in the sensory axons. Thus, the gamma motor neurons keep the spindle sensitive all the time. Thank you. This is all about the neuromuscular spindle.